Hey everybody, it's Rick and wanted to thank you for joining me on another Inwyt Walkabout. I am back in the Northeast after the little break in Sedona, and true to form, the weather is cold. It's 11 degrees out today. I think we're having one of the coldest winters on record for at least the short term. So yeah, bundled up and on a walk through the neighborhood. I wanted to continue or build on the conversation we had last time with regard to essentially the continuity of conflict, that we really use conflict or attempt to manage conflict with conflict, and how that just kind of keeps giving a perpetual spiral of continuity that we never seem to get out of. And I have another story to share with you from high school again, where I think I was, a junior or something like that. It was early spring, and I was busy with class. I was busy with lacrosse, so I had a pretty full-on schedule. And I woke up one morning at 6 a.m. to catch the bus, and I was just feeling really lousy. My body was just saying, "You are sick. You really ought to take the day off and just stay in bed." So reluctantly, I knew I was going to miss practice. I probably had some assignments at school that I needed to be present for, but I went over to my parents' bedroom, knocked on the door, and my father got up, and he's a pediatrician, and I said, "Dad, I'm not feeling well today. I think I'm going to just take the day off." And he kind of gave me that look of just sort of assessment, if you will, and he said, "Well, if you're really feeling that bad, then I guess you should take the day off." And so for an instant I was like, "Okay, I'm taking the day off." And then I started to think about what he had said, and then I was going, wait a minute, is he, sort of suggesting that maybe I really don't need to take the day off, that I'm just sort of making things up because I want a day off? And I went back to bed and, had this sort of play in my head as, are you really sick, or are you really just trying not to go to school today? And ultimately I can convince myself that maybe I was okay and maybe I should just go to school. And so anyway, I got up, got dressed, got on the bus, went to school, and went about my day, and essentially did okay. Wasn't feeling great, but now I had sort of this notion in my head that suck it up and just do your routine. Don't acquiesce to not feeling good. And long story short, about 3 days later, I got picked up from practice by my mom. Somebody picked me up, and I was just sick as a dog, and basically at the point of collapse. And essentially from that, turned out to have strep throat that needed antibiotics, and I was basically out of commission for probably the next 3 days, just flat on my back in bed. And all because I think I didn't listen to myself early on, but had all of these pressures that I created for myself to carry on, to suck it up. So, again, what's the point? I've kind of alluded to that, is, we have all of these assumptions and expectations and values that sit in our everyday life about, how we should show up for, in this case, school or sports, and, basically make that the priority and don't let things get in the way. And, when your body is telling you basically you're not well, essentially we're looking at or ignoring what is, and always focusing on what should be, which is based on those expectations and all of the, conditioning, if you will, that we live with. And then we do something that, ultimately gives us a payback that is maybe unexpected, but certainly unwanted. And now you're worse off than you were before, because now you're really out of commission for a longer period of time. And now you have a much longer recovery. So, again, I'm giving you an example, but the most important thing is for you to look at your own lives and how this shows up every day. And, we have examples all the time where, for example, as everyday experience, if you think about it, think about how, this balance between, work and personal life, or, going to work and sort of this need to exercise, again, sort of this expectation you should be exercising. And also your body needs exercise, but you have this sort of battle going on where it's, I'm busy, I've got so many things to do, and I'm tied up, and I know I should exercise, but, I really can't. Or you're in a situation where you're exercising and, your body's tired because you're spending all this other time saying, well, I have to, work really hard. I've got to put in my 12-hour day, and then I have to exercise. And now you're exhausted, right? And so the next day you go, well, my routine says you must exercise today. And, you ignore basically what your body is telling you, and sort of the underlying conflict, if you will, that is sort of driving this perceived need to follow through with this other expectation. And so we get trapped, right? And we're just miserable if we do, and we're miserable if we don't. And, it just becomes this ongoing spiral. And I think, one of the things that kind of struck me of late is how, we always seem to turn to some kind of life coach. We need somebody to tell us what to do, like help me get on the path, help me to stay on the path to wellness or success, or, some driver that matters to us. And, they come up with these phrases that essentially reinforce this whole conflict cycle that we're in. So one that comes to mind for me that I recently heard was, don't negotiate with your weakness, which basically was implying, if you wake up and you're supposed to exercise, or you're supposed to eat a certain way, and in the sense of exercise, you go, well, I really am tired, I really don't want to do it. The message is that's a sign of weakness. That if you give in to your body saying, I am tired, that's weakness. So don't negotiate with it, just do it, right? And that's basically what happened, in the example that I shared, and that, I think we basically follow through with, in many cases, with a lot of things that we do all the time. And it doesn't always end up in a bad, physical state, but it certainly doesn't make for, a conflict-free or a state of wellness, because you're just constantly struggling with what is and what should be, which gets layered on with another what is and what should be, and you just keep going endlessly. So, again, just kind of look at those things and recognize that even the example of what I just shared, whether it's work and exercise, also has a what is and what should be before that, right? Because, again, there's some expectation that we have that says you must work hard. And, behind that, there's another one. And behind that, there's another one. And so we're constantly playing in this divisive state of what is, or what we think is, and what we think should be, or what somebody else thinks we should be thinking. And we're always playing the what should be game. And we end up in a mess. So again, there's nothing to do about that other than to watch it and to observe it. And if you understand that deeply and you really start to see how that plays out, something may shift, right? Without effort. You just understand it and you go, why am I doing this? So that's it for today. Think about, watch your daily activities, watch how this sort of what is, what should be just keeps layering on top, and how it really makes for a very challenging way of living. And where at the end of the day, you can sort of step back and go, is this really necessary? Is this just, why do we accept this approach that, essentially we have learned, and that really is an expectation, and see what happens. So have a wonderful day, a great week, and I look forward to our next session. This is Rick with Inwyt Walkabout. Take care.